Yeah, I just want to ask the Minister, because there's real genuine concern out there by people right across I suppose the East Coast here that would use the DART line, the DART services, the downgrading that seems to be going ahead. Certainly it is going ahead in my own constituency, of which I am aware the Minister is a resident in also, County Wicklow. The Greystones DART station, to use a terrible pun, it's full steam ahead in terms of the downgrading of the Greystones DART station. Erin Road Erin have put out tenders to let the train station out as a commercial premises. They're going to move it to an unmanned service, which is going to have detrimental impacts on the people in Greystones, young and old, but in particularly disabled users. Now, there have been suggestions. I'm hearing back even from staff within Erin Road Erin that there are broader, larger plans there to move ahead with more unmanning of stations. And we know this is being rolled out not just along the DART line, but throughout the Irish Rail service across the entire state. I think to date 34 train stations have moved from being a manned service to an unmanned service. And as I touched on there, the impact this has on people, on communities, elderly people, being able to help them purchase their tickets, and also our disabled citizens. And there has been some positive progress in terms of accessing public transport for people with disabilities. And at this point, I just want to put on record my sincere condolences to a constituent, a friend, a colleague of mine, John Doyle, who during the course of his life was a disability rights campaigner, campaigning for independent living. He passed away on Sunday night. His funeral was only this morning, Minister. And throughout John's life, he fought long and hard with others in terms of trying to make our public transport system accessible for people with disabilities. And John, along with others, were fundamental in forcing Dublin Bus into acquiring a new bus fleet, the low-floor, wheelchair-accessible buses which were rolled out in the 90s. Whilst there's been progress there, there's also been some progress I welcome in terms of the notice in which wheelchair and people with disabilities, the notice in which they have to give to the train stations and Irish Rail Erin Road Erin, the 24-hour notice. There's a trial period or a trial programme being rolled out in the new year, where that's now going to be cut down to 4 hours notice for people with disabilities looking to use public transport. To me, to be honest, 4 hours is not enough. There should be total equality across the board. People with disabilities should be able to use our public transport service at any point without having to give any notice. So reducing it down to 4 hours is welcome, but it should be 0 hours. But the downgrading of our DART stations is going to fundamentally throw that up in the air. It's going to tear up any progress that has been made. As I said, Greystones is being rolled out. That's being moved to an unmanned train station in the new year, I'm being told. So I want to ask the Minister, what other plans is he aware of? Has he been speaking to the NTA? Has he been speaking to Erin Road Erin in terms of their plans to move towards unmanned DART stations here in Dublin and also in Wicklow?
Thank you, Deputy.
And what consultation has taken place?
Minister.
Thank you, Ceol, and I'd like to thank Deputy Brady for raising this very important question. I think it's quite unusual for a deputy to be questioning a constituent and making them accountable for what happens in their own constituency, but I'm happy to do so. And it's in the context, I suppose, of accessibility, which you're concentrating on, that I should respond to you. I take your point. I hear what you had to say about 4 hours not being enough. The situation at the moment, as you know, is currently people with impaired mobility are required to notify the train station of their intention to travel at least 24 hours in advance if they require assistance. I agree with you. That's totally unacceptable. And we should aspire to total equality between people with disabilities and people without in their access to public transport. As you say, Irish Rail hopes to commence early in the new year a pilot project on the Dart aimed at reducing the period of advance notice from 24 to 4 by guaranteeing staffing across group stations and ensuring flexibility to enable staff to move between stations to provide assistance. Irish Rail anticipates that the pilot project on the Dart, reducing the period of advance notice required from 24 to 4, will run for 6 months, at which point learnings will be used to inform how best to develop its customer service across all networks. And I hope that that particular experiment extends beyond Irish Rail to Dublin Bus and other means of public transport. And I accept completely the bona fides of the Deputy and what he's saying, and I accept the need that he's expressing for haste in this matter, because things seem to be moving very slowly. But let me say this, that the amount of money that's been given this year and in the future to accessibility has accelerated enormously. And it will, while I'm a Minister, also accelerate, I think, even faster than that. Let me just give you a couple of figures here. The 4-year capital envelope for public transport announced on budget 2018 includes a multi-annual allocation of almost 28 million for the accessibility retrofit programme for the period 2018 to 2021. And this funding is a trebling of the previous allocation for accessibility under the capital plan. That really is a fairly convincing, to me, commitment, which I insisted on, to accessibility in public transport, and I recognise the difficulties which there are, not just in the downgrading of the Dart, as you refer to it, but in other areas in public transport as well. And that's why we've given such a large increase to increase accessibility, and also why we've got this trial, this pilot scheme, to see if we can reduce the hours a lot. Ideally, yeah, let's get it to zero, but we can't do it. We can't do it overnight. We've also had other projects in Dublin Bus. I launched with Deputy McGrath as Minister for Disabilities a dump buggy in the wheelchair zone on Dublin Bus recently, where there were a lot of buggies obviously blocking up people who were on wheelchairs, and that I think has been, there's a public campaign about that which is increasing awareness as well. And so please don't doubt the commitment of the government to this. It's something which is being hastened and which is a priority, and which we'll insist upon. On the Greystones, maybe on the Greystones issue, maybe if you could indulge me for a second, I just want to read one paragraph which I prepared on this. Inrad Éireann have taken the opportunity to assess whether there is any commercial interest in the ground floor of the Greystones station building, particularly at the time the existing area is reserved for retail is vacant. While seeking expressions of interest, there has been no change to any arrangements, including staffing, on how the station functions. Inrad Éireann will be in a position early next year to assess the degree of commercial interest in the station building, which will enable it to make a decision on its future use in tandem with reviewing staffing. Customer needs will be taken into consideration should there be any change.
Thank you, Minister.
Listening to your response there, and I want to hone in on one line where you said that ideally we could get to a position where it's 0 hours. We don't need, people with disabilities don't need to give notice, ideally. But Minister, this move towards unmanned stations, DART stations, will ensure that never happens, because we need the stations to be manned to help our disabled citizens to get on and off our public transport. So, whilst you may aspire to that, if this is allowed go ahead, the downgrading of our train stations, our DART stations, we're ensuring that our citizens will not get equal access to our public transport. And there's real concern here, Minister, Because what I'm hearing back from staff in Erin Road, Erin, that it's a done deal. Whilst they're talking about commercially letting out the train station in Greystones, and I'd argue the point that, you know, the space there isn't available at the moment. It is staff quarters. It's used for the staff in the Greystone station. So they are moving ahead quite swiftly to an unmanned situation in Greystone. So can I ask the Minister, what other DART stations are being looked at? Has there been a consultation process, particularly with disability organisations? Because, you know, there is concern there. If you have a look at Sydney Parade, for example, that serves St Vincent's Hospital, and we know, coming from Wicklow, no direct buses serve St Vincent's. The DART is the only public transport. So if that moves to an unmanned system, our people with disabilities will be disenfranchised. They will not be able to get to St Vincent's. If you have a look at Sandymount train station, that serves Enable Ireland, the Enable Ireland premises, which houses a school for disabled children. So if that moves to an unmanned operation, again, you know, as you said, ideally it would be 0 hours or 0 time needed. So, Minister, I'm asking you to be more specific here. You are Minister for Transport. What consultation, what discussions have taken place with Erin Road, Erin, or what consultation?
I think the Deputy will understand fully that I have responsibility for the policy and overall funding in relation to public transport. I am not involved in the day-to-day operations of public transport. The operation of DART stations is a matter for Inrod Erin, and it's not an issue in which I have any statutory function. Now, specifically for customers requiring assistance, Inrod Erin plans to confirm new arrangements for mobility-impaired customers shortly, which will dramatically reduce, as we've said, the current advance notification period, ensure a better response when customers requiring assistance cannot give notice. These new arrangements, and this I think answers the Deputy's questions about consultation, are being designed following extensive customer research and liaison with the company's disability users group. They are consulted at every stage on this. But you have to remember that parallel with the need, which is absolutely imperative, that disabled people, people with disabilities, must be accommodated, and we should aspire to this, to the ideal which we both mentioned. Like every service, CIE, Inrod Erin, Dublin Bus, has to continually adapt and change in line with trends in customer behaviour and technology. We can't ignore advancing technology. With regard to the issue of station staffing, which the Deputy mentioned, I understand from Inrod Erin that this is under review in response to changed customer behaviour, with customers moving to prepaid ticketing and ticket vending machines. This obviously alters the pattern of how stations are staffed. The company has indicated that key stations, such as the city centre stations in Gloucester and Sandymount, which are adjacent to major facilities for the mobility impaired, will always be staffed.